Hey folks, welcome back to Ndaba After. This is Chris once again. And the topic today is information that emerged late on Sunday from South Africa that President Cyril Ramaphosa has decided to dock the pay of the sitting defense minister, who's been in office for, nearly a decade, 3 months over a trip to Zimbabwe in which she gave ANC party officials a free ride on government transport, which is forbidden by the parliamentary rules and handbook of the South African government. Let's delve into that a little bit and see what we're talking about here. Well, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has docked 3 months' pay from Minister Novasive Mapisa-Nqakula. She is the defense minister of South Africa, and she's been in the position since back 2012. And the reason for it is he called it misusing state resources for party political purposes, which is forbidden. President Ramaphosa, in announcing the 3 months dock pay, called it an error of judgment. Well, she'd been traveling to Zimbabwe's capital on the 9th of September for a scheduled meeting to discuss regional issues. Now, the delegation from South Africa's ANC, the ruling party, the African National Congress, was going there for crisis talks with Zimbabwe's ruling ZANU-PF under the crocodile, Emerson Mnangagwa, aimed at helping tackle the country's political and economic woes. Now, that's what's reported by the BBC. But which country's economic woes are we talking about? Zimbabwe's or South Africa's? Sorry, I digress. But he came to office in 2018, pledging to clean up the pervasive corruption that has crept into the party over the past 15 years, and that he would take a stand. But he's done virtually nothing to eliminate corruption. And in fact, we've seen pervasive, wide-scale, massive corruption in the midst of the Wuhan coronavirus COVID-19, with funds being pilfered from the unemployment insurance fund, funds being pilfered from the Solidarity Fund, funds being pilfered, food aid packages being pilfered by ANC cadres and government officials. We've saw all kinds of corruption on a scale that's hard to imagine in the midst of this misery inflicted on South Africans by their government and its National Coronavirus Command Council. Well, he has docked her pay. And he said that by giving ANC delegates a lift on the plane, she had not been acting in the best interest of good governance. With that, Cyril and I agree. Absolutely. Definitely not working in the best interest of the government. The purpose of military or government aircraft are not to transport political party officials around. Elected or appointed officials who work for the government is a different story. But simply giving ANC party officials a free ride to Zimbabwe is not acceptable. Certainly not unless they came up with a mechanism to compensate the state for their transportation. That is allowable, say, in the U.S. under certain circumstances. But in this case, that wasn't done. So she's had her pay docked for 3 months, and he's going to put the money into a fund to help fight coronavirus. Well, we'll see how that goes. The opposition Democratic Alliance, of course, complained and said this is simply a slap on the wrist. Well, ladies and gentlemen, is it a substantive effort to stamp out corruption or simply a slap on the wrist? I think that's a fair question. Some folks want to discuss the issue in Parliament, but apparently it's been tabled and it's not going any further. There are some who are calling for her scalp and want her to be sacked over this behavior. Well, frankly, in the scheme of things, this is not a particularly egregious behavior by ANC officials. We see this sort of activity taking place on a pervasive scale across the government all the time. Plus, we, of course, see ANC officials famously taking first-class flights when they shouldn't be taking first-class flights, running up the government's bills all the time. Now, the minister, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, is the spouse of the former defense minister himself, Charles Nqakula, who was the Minister of Defense from 2008-2009, and he was succeeded by Lindiwe Sisulu, the daughter of Walter Sisulu. So she comes from, obviously, ANC royalty, if such a thing exists. But Charles was the defense minister from 2008-2009, succeeded by Lindiwe Sisulu, and Lindiwe Sisulu was succeeded by none other than the current defense minister, who happens to be the spouse of the previous defense minister. It's really nice, the incestuous relationship the ANC has for its Communist Party members like Charles, and their relationship with the African National Congress. For his part, Charles has been the High Commissioner to Mozambique for South Africa since June of 2012. Same time that his spouse was put in the position as defense minister. Both have been in their positions for over 8 years. You want to talk about an ossified, fossilized government bureaucracy and apparatus. Leaving ambassadors in position or attaches or government ministers for so many years is not healthy for any government. Not at all. Now, for her part, she's an MK veteran. That's Umkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing of the African National Congress, founded by Nelson Mandela back in the 1960s. And she was responsible for investigating MK veterans or MK members who had fled to refugee camps to escape being part of the conflict. That was part of her responsibility. So not a real fighter there. But she served as the Minister of Home Affairs from 2004 to 2009. And she has been she then served as the Minister of Correctional Services from 2009 to 2012. And since 2012, she has been the Minister of Defense. So basically, she's been on the government teat, not holding down a job in the private sector since 2004. 16 straight years in government at incredibly high levels of responsibility. You would think that after 16 years in government, that a minister would be able to make the distinction about when you're allowed to give private political party officials a ride and when you can't. 16 years, one can only help but wonder how many times in the past 16 years has he abused his privilege, and only now is she being called out. Well, I would tell you that it's simply a slap on the wrist. And why is it a slap on the wrist? One might start to question what's going on here. With Cyril Ramaphosa's tenuous grip over the African National Congress, one can't help but wonder if it's not an effort to put a little bit of stain on the Zuma faction, the Zuma allies in his government. Think about it, folks. She's clearly a Zuma appointee, and this slap on the wrist will not exactly destroy her, but it certainly doesn't help her reputation. Will make it easier for him to sideline her and others who behave in a similar fashion from a faction that doesn't support Cyril Ramaphosa. Remember, there was a big split in the ANC at the party Congress in 2017 when Ramaphosa was barely elected over Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma herself, the ex-wife of Jacob Zuma, the former president, whom Ramaphosa succeeded. Well, both the Minister of Defense, Nosiviwe, and her husband Charles contracted the Wuhan coronavirus COVID-19 virus, unfortunately, in July of this year. Both have recovered. That's good news for both of them. Excellent to hear. But here we have it, a situation of the president of South Africa doing what I consider to be simply window dressing in the midst of all kinds of pervasive corruption amongst ANC government officials at all levels. And we see the slap on the wrist, 3 months pay docked for someone who's receiving a paycheck since 2004 at very high levels of government. Well, folks, if you found this video interesting or informative or thought-provoking, feel free to become a member of Chris Wyatt Africa if you're not already a member by smashing that subscription button right down there. And be sure to toggle the bell icon, because if you don't, you'll never get notified of my updates and my live streams and very interesting guests that we come on the channel and interview, like Dr. Victor Davis Hanson or Dr. Corné Mulder, the whip of the chief whip of the Freedom Front Plus in South Africa, or Steve Hofmeyer, for that matter, Giselle, many other folks who are quite interesting on the channel. If you have a comment, feel free to leave a comment or a question. I do my best to read all of them. If it's a nasty comment, you might just become the subject of a nasty comment video. And finally, I ask that you smash the like button, because likes drive viewership. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. President Cyril Ramaphosa has slapped the wrist of his defense minister, a Zuma-era appointee, in an effort to stamp out corruption in South Africa. Not really, folks. Window dressing, window dressing. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for your patronage, and we'll catch you next time here on Indaba Africa.